Yeah, absolutely. So without further ado, let's take a look at what these players chose to do in this sort of a context. We're going to jump on over to our first player here, which is indeed David Partington, with a pretty impressive record of a pretty great caster. We got to cast with him earlier today. That was awesome. And also, London Open 6-3 in 2023, a top 16 at Lille Regionals in 2022, a qualification in Players Cup 2, and a top 12 there, and the Bristol Regional Champion in 2019, bringing, once again, that single-strike Urshifu and the Farigiraf, this team that the UK's really been pulling out all the stops with in this finals set.
Yeah, Farigiraf and Urshifu, Farigiraf is one of those Pokemon, I think, so depending on how it's used, it can be either really, really powerful, or maybe not quite so useful. But I think Team UK has showcased how Farigiraf can be really, really helpful on a team. And, paired with that Ursaluna that was released as part of the Teal Mask DLC, which is a little bit different to the regular Ursaluna, and this is a special set, so it doesn't really care so much about Intimidate. And, looking at the team that David's got, you've got Iron Hands and maybe the Ogerpon, maybe that might not enjoy being intimidated too much, but the Urshifu isn't going to care because it's always going to land a critical hit, and Fluttermane, Ursaluna, Farigiraf, or special attackers, so a really, really nice balanced team that, goes really well against a lot of the Intimidate teams that are quite heavily focused in the current meta.
Yeah, I really like that point, that this is just a team where it's really hard to do damage reduction around. You've got Urshifu doing a lot of really powerful damage, and it's off of a different type than what you're normally expecting the critical hits to be, because it's that single strike instead of the rapid strike. And then you have way more special attackers than teams normally have. You've still got a lot of offensive pressure if the opponent doesn't bring something like Intimidate, with, say, that Ogerpon, but even if they do, it's really hard to handle all of this damage. And I think that's a brilliant thing to do when you're facing down Argentina, known for a lot of really awesome defensive plays, things like Aurora Veil and Intimidate being strong options. So yeah, I think really just speaks to some awesome team construction here.
Yeah, and now let's take a look at David's opponent's team, Joaquín Salerno. He's going to be... let's have a look at his achievements first. So he's got Santiago Regional Top 4, Buenos Aires Special Event Champion, Sao Paulo Regional Champion, and Montevideo Special Event Finalist. So, a two-time regional champion, or special event, is essentially a regional, and you can see a lot of really, really impressive accomplishments. And on the left, we can see Joaquín's team, and this is going to be that it's hyper-offensive team that came second at the LAIC recently.
Yeah, this is absolutely, I think, my favorite team I've seen in the whole regulation. I'm so excited to get the cast it again. Bringing that Ogerpon, Fluttermane, Chi-Yu, Indeedee, Tornadus, and Regieleki with that really cool combination of Electroweb plus Beads of Ruin. Just so much power coming up from Joaquín's side of the field, and we'll see if it's enough to be able to break David's team.
Yeah, there's just so much immediate offense coming off it. Regieleki, might not be able to do as much damage against a dark Urshifu, but it is still so strong. And paired up against a Chi-Yu, that Beads of Ruin just dropping the special defense of all the Pokemon on the field. This is going to be a really, really hyped up match, and I can't wait to see what the outcome of it will be.
Absolutely. I think also there's just a lot of really cool defensive options on Joaquín's side of the field. Having that Indeedee to be able to redirect everything with a special defense boost, having the Focus Sash on Fluttermane to be able to throw off a few attacks, even with the special defense drop from Chi-Yu. But at the same time, I'm not sure what options there are on Joaquín's side of the field for handling Trick Room. It feels like there's a lot of damage that can come out from most of these Pokemon, but not a lot of things like Taunt, and not a lot of ways to redirect powerful damage from something like a Hyper Voice from a Blood Moon Ursaluna. And so it's going to be pretty important to see what Joaquín's options are there. I think this team might be a bit of a tough matchup if David's able to get the right setup going into it.
Yeah, I think Joaquín might need to rely quite a bit more on the Indeedee just to kind of stall out some turns of Trick Room with the help of Follow Me and Protect. So, let's get into our matches and see how these two players have figured out the matchups and what the outcome of it will be.
Absolutely. We're going to see Chi-Yu starting next to that Ogerpon rather than its favorite friend Regieleki, and Urshifu next to that Farigiraf, being able to be that lead here. So a lot of damage pressure off of that Chi-Yu, but it's maybe not the safest thing in the world sitting down against this Urshifu, especially without that Ogerpon being able to redirect anything. It doesn't have that Follow Me option.
Yeah, Chiyu is not going to be looking too safe against the Urshifu. It does have a very nice matchup against the Free Giraffe. Of course, the Free Giraffe can just go for the immediate terror just to, make sure that it doesn't take any super effective hits and get that Trick Room up. But at the same time, the Urshifu just really, really heavily threatens that Chiyu, and we see that terror option coming off from David. So not wanting to take any sort of risks and just wanting to get that Trick Room up immediately, and Urshifu just putting off so much offensive pressure at the start.
Yeah, David really just sort of giving a showcase of the main options he has on his side of the field. A ton of pressure from the Urshifu immediately, and a ton of pressure later on with this Fridruff being able to set up that Trick Room that we talked about could be really difficult for Joaquin to handle on his side of the field. Going for the Terrestrialization into the Water type, so it's safe from the Chiyu's Overheat, or this Heat Wave as it's coming out, and Urshifu's Focus Sash going to protect it from the KO there as well.
Yeah, that was so much damage shot coming off that Chiyu, going for Heat Wave. Luckily, managing to hit the Hornage off of Joaquin, just calling that Terra Water from that Fridruff and just knocking it out immediately. So David is going to lose that Fridruff on the turn 1, and that Wicked Blow coming off from the Urshifu onto the Ogerpon, just bringing it down really, really low. And I think that was a really good turn 1 for Joaquin, just Fridruff, getting knocked out, the Terror being used up as well. But of course, David's still got 2 more Pokemon in the back, and they're 2 both really offensive Pokemon, so this is far from over.
Yeah, I think Joaquin's turn 1 was just spectacular. Really gives David a lot of questions about how to set up Trick Room going forwards, because that was a really straightforward double target that totally took care of those. But as you mentioned, David does still have a lot of offense here. And so I think the core question in my mind is how these speed tiers are going to be lining up, because if David's running things like an Ogerpon that's designed to be slower to leverage Trick Room, it might be really hard to handle all of these offensive threats that Joaquin still has without that successful Trick Room. But if the Ogerpon's a little bit faster, then suddenly David's in a much stronger position with the option to do a lot of damage with Urshifu, with Sucker Punch or Close Combat, and maybe a fast Ogerpon that can do a lot of damage with a Terrestrialization. But we can't Terrestrialize, but it can still Ivy Cudgel or Horn Leech or Swords Dance.
Yes, indeed, and that Ogerpon is going to be, with the access to Swords Dance, is going to be quite strong. And, the Ogerpon on Joaquin's side is in range of a Sucker Punch, so if that Ogerpon chooses to attack, I think there's a bit of a mind game going on right now, just to whether or not what David's going to do, but Ogerpon is going to withdraw, so not wanting to take any kind of risks from a Sucker Punch, and obviously not wanting to protect him from the Urshifu, but that Indeedee is going to come in, so just protecting its teammate from any sort of Sucker Punches coming its way, that Psychic Terrain is going to get set up, and we see that Psychic Seed raising its special defense, which is not going to be doing too much against both these special attackers, but Urshifu also just going for a detect, just to scout out what Joaquin is going to do and keep himself safe.
Ivy Cudgel coming out into that Chiyu, not going to be a 2-hit KO, or if it is, it's definitely a damage roll, as that Heat Wave comes out here. Going to do a ton of damage if it's able to connect into this Ogerpon, which indeed it is, bringing that Ogerpon fairly low. But crucially, we've seen that this Ogerpon is faster than the Chiyu, and that Life Orb chip puts that Chiyu into range where another Ivy Cudgel might just pick that up.
Yes, indeed. Although the Indeedee is now on the field, so it can go for a follow me and just keep its teammate Chiyu safe for another attack. I think the Chiyu we saw is going to be faster than the Urshifu, so the Urshifu cannot Sucker Punch with the Psychic Terrain. So if the Chiyu goes for another Heat Wave and manages to land and attack onto the Urshifu, that Urshifu will get knocked out this turn.
It really feels like David's kind of banking on a Heat Wave miss at this point. I think this is just such a wonderful position to get into with the Indeedee, not being caught by a Wicked Blow or anything on that switch-in, because it wasn't an option with that Chiyu's pressure. And now that Follow Me, as you mentioned, a lot of attacks can go out and do a lot of damage, but only into that Indeedee. And it's going to survive that Ivy Cudgel handily, and she's going to be able to Heat Wave. And with the Connect on the Urshifu, that brings David down to just 1 Pokemon left, next to a Chiyu plus Redirection plus 2 other Pokemon.
Oh yeah, and I think we saw that it is going to be that Ursaluna out the back, which does have Hyper Voice, so it's not going to care about any sort of redirects. But of course, it is 1 Pokemon, and I think that Ursaluna still has to get through all 4 of Joaquin's team, so it is probably a bit of a tall order for this Ursaluna, which is going to get outsped by the Chiyu, and maybe Joaquin might be considering going for Dark Pulse instead of any Heat Waves or Overheats, just to be safe, because there's still 2 Pokemon in the back, but David, I think, is going to recognize that the Ursaluna is not going to be able to clutch out this game, and is going to forfeit and maybe just... Yeah.
I think that's a very fair... Sorry, go ahead. David just trying to take some time to regather his thoughts, figure out what he can go forwards. I think that's a super fair forfeit, being able to just sort of recognize that turn 1 went, I think, the worst it could possibly have gone, save the Heat Wave also getting a burn. Burning the Terrestrialization and still losing the Frigiraf meant that David just really lost all of his options going forwards. There was no Trick Room, there was no ability to Terrestrialize the Overcon Hearthflame to be able to get that KO on the Chi-Yu. It really felt like he just put all of his eggs in the Trick Room basket, and it didn't work out with the lead that Joaquin had. And so I think there's just a lot of questions of, can David rely less on the Trick Room? Can he bring more support to be able to set that up? Can he punish that same play by maybe going for a close combat with his Urshifu? There's a few options, but definitely with how that first game played out, it didn't feel like there was any point in using the Ursaluna through the end of that game.
Yeah, well, Joaquin, I think, made a really, really aggressive read that turn 1, which ended up paying off. And I think he really had to make that aggressive read, because once the Trick Room went up, it would have been very, very problematic for him. So I think that lead that he let off, just to make sure that whatever, by making some bold, risky plays, he could prevent that Trick Room from going off, and therefore he had control of the game, of speed control for the remainder of the match. And so let's get into that game 2 and see how David is going to adjust to that game 1.
Yeah, talking through adjustments, I don't know what it is that... Like, Joaquin's in such an odd position because that worked the first time, but it was a bit of a risky play, and so there's a lot of questions for sort of like how you want to go into this next game. I believe we're ready to jump into that next game, but there's a lot of questions I think both players have on their minds, like how do you make a consistent prediction going into the second game?
Yeah, so we're going to see a bit of a switch up at this time. It's going to be the Indeedee and Chi-Yu, and also a bit of a switch up on David as well, going to lead with the main and Urshifu. So David may be recognizing that maybe there's no need to kind of get that Trick Room set up, maybe just go for the speed. I mean, like, Bloodmane is going to be the fastest Pokemon on the field. With the Chi-Yu, which is actually going to be, to helping Fluttermane's special attacks against that Indeedee. Of course, Indeedee does have Psychic Seed, so it is going to be boosted, but Indeedee is also very, very heavily threatened by that Urshifu on the field.
Yeah, it's definitely threatened in base typing, so you might see a Terrestrialization come out here to sort of give some options. I believe it is that... I believe it's the Dragon Terrestrialization, so it's able to handle that Wicked Blow. But having that redirection either way is definitely pretty huge, because Chi-Yu's been able to do so much damage to David's side of the field in the whole first game, and it seems like it's still safe to keep doing that. The one advantage from David's side of the field is having that Fluttermane that can take hits pretty well from the special side and take advantage of that Beads of Ruin. But I think there's definitely still a question for sort of... David has a lot of damage options, but does he have damage options quickly enough to handle the damage that's coming back with that redirection plus Heat Wave option?
Yeah, and once again, we're going to see a Terrestrialization turn 1, this time from the Urshifu, giving it the Terra Dart, so, allowing its Wicked Blows to hit really, really hard. And that Urshifu, you're going to see, Helping Hand coming off from the Indeedee, so making sure that any Heat Wave coming off from the Chi is going to really, really hurt. But Icy Wind, nice play.
The Icy Wind lowering the speed on that Chi-Yu, definitely going to set up this Urshifu to do a lot, but it looks like this is a Wicked Blow targeting into that Indeedee, so Indeedee didn't need to redirect the attack, it was just going to take it either way, and that leaves this Chi-Yu in perfect position to be able to land that Helping Hand boosted attack, to be able to try to take out some of these Pokemon on the other side of the field. Looks like it's going to be a Heat Wave going into that Fluttermane, but still not picking up the KO, even with the Helping Hand.
Oh yeah, even with Helping Hand and Life Orb boost, and that Chi-Yu is a Terrifier, so I think if Joaquin had gone for a Terrestrialization, that time that Bloodmane would have been knocked out, but Bloodmane just showcasing how bulky it is. On the special side, that was a Helping Hand Life Orb boosted Chi-Yu, and it still managed to cling on with, maybe not as much health, but 11 HP, so that could have been, I think he would have probably survived, wasn't so much, could be a damage roll, but at the same time wasn't like 1 HP and just hanging on. But Joaquin taking some time to send out his next Pokemon, just really thinking about, it is going to be that Fluttermane, so I'm interested to see what kind of speed interactions we'll have between the two Fluttermanes.
I think it's going to be sort of tough for Joaquin's side of the field, because with that Focus Sash, if it is a slower Fluttermane after the booster energy boost on David's side of the field, that means that there's an option to just Icy Wind and Wicked Blow and finish off that Fluttermane immediately. The Chi-Yu is also threatened, it's already quite slow from that Icy Wind from the previous turn. So I think David just has a lot of tools with having that Fluttermane sort of convincing survival with 11 HP. Gives sort of a lot of ways for sort of David to say, haha, you had the speed advantage last time, but now I do. and that gives him a lot of ways to sort of bring this forwards into this next turn.
Yeah, a really good adjustment from Dave, but Fluttermane going for a Protect right in front of that Urshifu, so a very, very bold play, and Icy Wind coming off once more onto Joaquin's side, so dropping that Chi-Yu even slower, but I think critically it did not get the speed drop on Fluttermane, but we're going to see which target did that Urshifu pick, and the Urshifu went into, but it's going to be the close combat onto the Chi-Yu, so knocking it out easily, dropping his defense, but at 1 HP, anything would have knocked out that Urshifu, but it was quite a nice play there, just very bold of Joaquin just to protect right in front of the Fluttermane, right in front of the Urshifu. Of course, I think with the Focus Sash, maybe Joaquin thought, even if he does get hit by a Wicked Blow, the Fluttermane would have been around for one more turn. And now the Ogerpon is going to come in, although I don't think this Ogerpon has Follow Me, so it is just going to be able to get an attack off Joaquin down to his final 2 Pokemon.
Yeah, I think if David's able to connect these Icy Winds, and that is a big if, then he's in a pretty good position to be able to sort of clean up this game. I really liked the play from both players last time. I think if the targeting had been a little bit different, then that definitely could have brought Joaquin back in the game. But with things as they are now, this Icy Wind is going to come out, going to lower the speed, and Urshifu is going to be able to attack before anything else. Just such a wonderfully powerful combination here. The booster speed plus the Terra Dark Wicked Blow, finishing off the Ogerpon and leaving Joaquin with just a -1 speed Fluttermane for the rest of this game. It can probably pick up a double KO here with Dazzling Gleam, but it's unlikely to be very comfortable against 2 other Pokemon in the back from David's side of the field.
Yes, a very good adjustment from David, and especially that Fluttermane on Joaquin's side is Focus Sash, so it's not going to have so its damage output is not going to be as strong as, say, a Choice Specs or a Booster Energy special attack. Ogerpon. Fluttermane. I was looking at the Ogerpon on the screen there, but with the Fluttermane at -1 the stage of speed with a speed drop, that it's going to get outsped by the Ogerpon, which can hit it on its physically weaker side. So I think game 2 is probably going to go to David, and a really, really fantastic adjustment from David, recognizing maybe Farigiraf is not the best lead, but it's something nice to have in the back for a late game Trick Room.
And that was really interesting because it felt like David sort of leveraged the way that he lost Game 1 to put him in a better position for Game 2. Like, he sort of established the expectation of, I'm going to try to set up Trick Room, I'm going to bring a bunch of Pokemon that need Trick Room, like the Ursaluna, and you know how to handle this, so just keep doing the same thing to handle Trick Room. And then he totally switches it up and brings that Fluttermane, and that Icy Wind plus Wicked Blow is so hard to handle. It felt like it was just sort of David picking which Pokemon he wanted to KO every turn, and that was, like, Joaquin only had options that were as convoluted as, like, protecting in front of an Urshifu, which I think was a brilliant play, but really relied on, like, guessing targeting correctly. And I think that's a really tough spot to be in, and it's definitely on Joaquin to try to find another answer into this, like, fast mode that David has on his team.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I think David definitely capitalized on that game 1 where he lost because he didn't hit the Farigiraf went down so early, but he managed to adjust and say, look, I think I know you're going to try and do something to prevent my Trick Room from going up again, so I'm not going to have Trick Room. I'm not going to lead with that. I'll keep it in the back because it's still very helpful, but I'm going to lead with my other form of speed control, which now leads me to wonder, with this game 3, is Joaquin maybe going to lead with the Tornadus, because that way it completely prevents any sort of icy winds for at least 3 turns anyway. So I think, in that game 1, it was more maybe he he benched the Tornadus, thinking there was Trick Room, and that was what happened. But in game 2, he didn't quite make the adjustment that David did, and in that case, we'll see how game 3 we're going to see a very different lead: Regieleki and Fluttermane versus Fluttermane and Urshifu. So same leads from David, but a bit of a switch up on the floor.
Yeah, Joaquin just going for the Regieleki, the really fast Electroweb option to kind of counter the fast Icy Wind option on David's side of the field. I think that's a really interesting adjustment. Tornadus would have totally solved this lead matchup, but it's so risky for Joaquin to pick because of that Trick Room option and it not having a lot of options into that. Whereas meanwhile, Regieleki at least has some options to do like a Thunderbolt into a Farigiraf, especially if it tears. And so I think this was a nice way to sort of try to balance things out. I believe even if that Fluttermane lands an Icy Wind, there's no way that Regieleki is going to get slower than Urshifu anytime soon. And so that feels like it gives a lot of options to Joaquin's side of the field. I don't think David really loves having this lead matchup, except for maybe the option to go for Sucker Punches.
Yeah, Regieleki is so fast, it's really not going to care about a one-stage attack or one-stage speed drop. But as you mentioned, that Sucker Punch is going to come up immediately, but is not going to knock out that Regieleki. But Moonblast also just doubling up into that Regieleki. Just, David recognizing it's a really big threat and just trying to get rid of it immediately, but that does leave the Fluttermane free to go for a Shadow Ball, and I'm curious to see if that's enough to knock it. It is not enough, so a very good turn one from David, just capitalizing, or just kind of doubling up into that Regieleki, kind of maybe realizing that Joaquin might be a bit reluctant to go for a Protect in front of the Urshifu, and just getting rid of that Electro Web option immediately.
Yeah, that's just such a wonderful play from David, and this Fluttermane really is just like the absolute MVP of that side of the field, taking the Shadow Ball, taking the Heat Wave last time. And as you mentioned, like, there's just such a mind game with Dark Terra Urshifu, and having that single strike option. Like, you can Sucker Punch to handle Regieleki that way. If it had protected, you could have just Wicked Blowed it. Like, it was really hard for Joaquin to get that play right. And in the meantime, David just keeps steadily taking KOs by getting those calls right. Bringing us down to just 3 Pokemon on Joaquin's side of the field. And that Fluttermane still solidly has that speed advantage to go for an Icy Wind this turn.
Yes, indeed it does. And I think the Urshifu also has its Focus Sash intact, so it is a little bit, I think that was one of the reasons why maybe David wasn't quite as concerned about, you know, maybe the Fluttermane going for a Dazzling Gleam or Moonblast from Joaquin's side, because he had the Focus Sash, so it was guaranteed to live at least one hit. Now we see a Terra coming off, I think, from David. I think I caught a glimpse of it, so I think he might have gone for a Terra Dark Wicked Blow on one of these 2 Pokemon, and, you know, Fluttermane next to it, providing the Icy Wind support is just so nice, and we do see that Terrestrialization coming off onto the Urshifu, just wanting to make sure that any of its Dark type attacks are going to be hitting really hard.
Yeah, being able to boost that power this much is just incredible, especially into something like the Indeedee. It's going to redirect whatever targeting was from David's side of the field and make sure that the Indeedee goes down first, but as you mentioned, with that Focus Sash intact, things are going to be tough. Icy Wind comes out, lowers the speed of that Fluttermane, bringing that Urshifu to be the fastest thing on the field now on David's side of the field other than the Flutter. And the Wicked Blow is going to finish off that Indeedee, bringing us down to just 2 Pokemon on Joaquin's side of the field, as Joaquin's going to be able to retaliate, but there's no way he's able to KO this Urshifu.
Yeah, not this turn anyway. It will be brought down to its Focus Sash. And, actually, was not even brought down to its Focus Sash. So, Urshifu, you know, showing that Terra Dark can be a bit of a defensive Terra as well, just getting rid of that times for weakness to Fairy. But now also Joaquin's Fluttermane is at, I believe, -2 speed. And with Joaquin down to his last 2 Pokemon, he is no longer able to switch out that Fluttermane to reset the speed drop. So that was really well played on David's part, just, you know, slowly whittling away at his opponent's Pokemon to the point where now this Fluttermane, being the slower Pokemon on the field, is going to have to take an attack before he can get something off, and might not even actually get an opportunity to attack.
Yeah, absolutely. Being stuck at -1 speed on a Fluttermane is really just getting rid of one of the strongest benefits of that Pokemon in its entirety. We do see Ogerpon Water gets to hit the field from Joaquin's side of the field. I don't believe we've seen the speed interaction just yet between the 2 Ogerpons. That might be pretty crucial for this turn. If that Ogerpon's able to be faster and KO either the Urshifu or the Ogerpon, maybe that gives some options, but as you mentioned, with the Fluttermane stuck at -1 speed, they're definitely pretty limited options from Joaquin's side of the field.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see, as you mentioned, what the speed interactions between the 2 Ogerpons will be. Because the Fire Ogerpon is... actually, they kind of... If they use Ivy Cudgel and I said the grass typings, the secondary grass typing of both the Ogerpons is going to help against each other's Ivy Cudgels, I should say. But Urshifu is... I believe it should be slower than the Ogerpon, depending on how Joaquin's trained his Pokemon. And we see actually Urshifu going for the tech. Maybe David wanting just to scout out how fast that Ogerpon on Joaquin's side is. And Fluttermane also going for it. So quite a bold play, but Horn Leech we see. So David's Ogerpon is likely going to be faster than Joaquin's one, which is going to retaliate with an attack into the Urshifu. I didn't quite catch what the attack was, but the Urshifu very wisely protected itself against that attack, keeping itself
I believe that was
one more time.
I believe that was a Horn Leech. I'm just trying to get a little bit of hit points back for this Ogerpon, but with that Detect call, that's pretty strong for David, because this Ogerpon's really losing that limited resource of hit points pretty steadily, and with that Fluttermane having burned its Protect, either Pokemon can now take that KO. It doesn't have to be Urshifu being able to do that. Meanwhile, this Ogerpon might even be in range of a Sucker Punch. Just so many options for damage from David's side.
Yeah, we see Joaquin actually trying to go for a second Protect, but failing. So Ivy Cudgel is going to land, and critical hit knocking it out. I don't know if that mattered or not. It might have been a bulky Fluttermane, but I think at this stage the Fluttermane would have had to take a lot of attacks. But Horn Leech coming out, so giving a little bit more health back to Joaquin's Ogerpon, but now this Ogerpon has to face off against also David's final Pokemon, so it's got quite a lot of work left for it to do if it wants to win this match.
Yeah, absolutely. If I had to bet on the side that has just an Ogerpon versus the side that has an Ogerpon and an Iron Hands, I'd bet on the Iron Hands side any day. I feel like that's just too much defensive power, and a little bit, even just a little bit of chip from the Iron Hands really pushes this in David's favor. And that brings David to just a pretty solid way to try to wrap this up and keep the UK streak going.
Yeah, because especially when we see, I think the Ogerpon David side is faster, so there's really a lot. But Spiky Shield does come off it, so we can just try to burn off that one attack. Maybe that was a speed tie, and maybe the Ogerpon could have pulled something back by doing for a Spiky Shield. But I think at this stage, it is very, very difficult for Joaquin to pull this back, and I think David has a very chance of locking this in, barring any sort of misclicks maybe. But I think at this stage, I think the game is pretty much set for UK this match.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's a speed tie and there's a critical hit or something, but no. The Ogerpon outspeeds from David's side, and because of the Horn Leech doing a lot less than Ivy Cudgel just finishes that off right away. David didn't even need the Iron Hands.
No. So a very convincing win for David. I think really nice that we got to see 3 games and both players kind of adjusting. Joaquin making that kind of turn 1 game 1 was such an aggressive read and such an aggressive play, but ended up paying off really well, and that kind of really, it was quite one-sided in the game 1, but David then made some really, really excellent adjustments in games 2 and 3, and I think maybe it might have been a little bit more different if there was a Tornadus we see in maybe turn 2 or 3, but the Flutter Mane Icy Wind on David's side just proving to be so valuable as a form of control.
Yeah, I thought that was just so interesting that David lost the first game in a way that made it possible to win the next 2. Being able to have that Flutter Mane mode that was so difficult to adjust for without bringing the Tornadus, but then it was so high risk to bring that because it doesn't have taunt, or even if it did, that doesn't work against Farigiraf. There's nothing you can do if you bring Tornadus into a Farigiraf, and so it was this really tough mind game, and Joaquin tried to make a middle ground play, bringing the Regieleki, but got punished for it really hard with that Sucker Punch and Moonblast play on turn 1. David just landed some wonderful predictions on the lead matchup that really won him this set, and it was really cool to see.